Why you need to make your comic now. A couple of reasons. Before I dive in, just a reminder, this video is for entertainment. These are my own opinions. Pick and choose what you want to take away from this video, but it's pretty much just my opinion on why you should be making your comic now. So, number one, it is to tell your story. The reason why I bring up this point is because we all have our own unique life experiences, which in turn we see the world in a different perspective. Therefore, to me, it's worth hearing your story, whether your intent is to entertain, to teach, or to inspire others. Another thing I want to add is that the execution of storytelling can hit differently when it comes from someone who's telling the story through research versus someone who is telling a story through experience. For an example, say a romantic story. It's different when you hear it from someone who has never been in a romantic relationship compared to someone who has. Or another example is when a story contains certain ethnic cultures and communities or specific activities like sports. I'm not saying that someone who is telling a story through research cannot tell the story well in comparison to someone else who's telling a story through experience. But sometimes, through research, some things might not be properly recorded when it comes to all the nuances of having the actual experience. So it can be tough sometimes for someone who is telling a story through research on perhaps like the day-to-day or whatnot, and ultimately they have to fill in the blanks on what they can imagine what it feels like to go through that. On the flip side, when somebody is speaking from experience, everybody can experience it differently, so there is always going to be that as a caveat. However, let me clarify here. I'm bringing up this point not to make you feel that you must have a sense of responsibility to have to tell stories for the underrepresented groups that you belong in, but rather that your life experience influences the way you tell stories, and that it is worth sharing your story even if it's a fictional story. Reason number two on why you need to make your comic now is that it takes time. A comic project is a lot of work, and it can take years to do your comic. There's so many components to a comic project, and it's definitely not a small project, depending on if you're planning to do a serialized comic story or if you're going to be doing like a gag a day type of comic project. They are different, but in general, for comic projects, they do take a lot of time to draft, to line, and if you're going to be coloring it, and just in general to execute your project. So it's best that you get your project going now. It is up to you on how much time you want to dedicate to your comic project, but if it is your goal that you want to create a comic, then you need to start now, because it takes a lot of time to get to the point where you've completed your project and you have episodes ready and you're ready to post. So reason number three is somebody else is going to beat you to it. When I say that, I am talking about your comic story idea. The thing is this, ideas are just dimes of a dozen. Even if somebody has the same idea as you, we all execute it differently. I still say this as a point because when somebody has a similar idea and they get their story out there before you do, and if you start working on your story and you get it out after them, some readers might say that you were influenced by this other person's work, or some might even say that you're a copycat, which honestly anybody can make any sort of accusations at any point in time. But what I'm trying to say here is you may run across these types of nuances, especially if the other person's work blows up with a notable reach. So to try to be a bit more proactive, you should start your comic project now so that you can release it as soon as possible before someone else swoops in and tells the same story. But hold on. If you're thinking that there's no way that someone else has the same idea as you, that your idea is so powerfully unique and nowhere to be found on this planet Earth except in your mind. Now, I hate to be the one to break it to you, but I'm going to answer this with a question. Do you really think that in this entire world where we have, let me see, how many people are on this earth right now? I gotta look this up. How many people are in the world? Okay, do you really think that in this entire world where we have 7.8 billion people on this planet Earth, that it is not possible for at least 2 people to think of the same idea? If you said yes, I'm going to have to ask you to think again. Basically, what I'm saying is anybody can think of an idea. That's probably the easiest part in this entire comic making process. The other thing I want to mention is some people may argue that all stories are all retold stories because there is no quote unquote original idea. I do believe there is some truth to that. Everything is a trope, every character is an archetype, it's all been told before. However, I say it's not much about the individual parts of our story, which has all been told before, but it's more about the entire compilation and arrangement of how we tell our story. To get back to the point here, I'm saying there is a sense of urgency to get started on your comic project now because someone else really might beat you to it. If that is the case, or it's already happened, don't worry. It's not an end-all be-all. It just means you need to be more strategic on how you release your story. The fourth reason is you need to start your comic project now so that you can start to establish your comic intellectual property, your IP. That's your story, your characters, your world building, and whatnot. And, kind of tying along with the last point I made is that somebody's going to beat you to it. So reason number 5 is you have a limited number of time. Yes, I'm talking about lifespan. Our lifespan is limited and you're only getting older. When you get older, we're talking about a lot of things. Is that you could have more responsibilities, whether that's for work, your family, or your friends. And it's really a race against time here. At the same time, we don't know what the future is going to hold for us. When I say that, I'm talking about all the good and bad things, such as not being able to predict if something terrible is going to happen to you or somebody you care about that is going to affect your day-to-day life, like accidents, like car accidents, work accidents, or recreational accidents. Obviously, accidents are not planned. And it could be something that is life-altering. While you still are able to, you can at least predict in this very moment, like, yeah, actually I can pick up a pencil and I can draw. Or I can pick up a pencil and I can start to write out my story. For as long as you can be able to say that in this moment, that you can do that, this is all the more reason why you need to start now, because we do not know what the future holds for us. Now, if you are thinking that you have legitimate reasons on why you can't start your comic project, I understand. You have responsibilities or you have other priorities and you just don't have the time. And I believe you. However, this means that your comic project will never begin. It will remain as a dream in the back of your mind. If you're okay with that, then it is what it is. But if you're not okay with that, then something needs to change. Ultimately, you're going to need to reevaluate and rearrange how you're spending your time and find a way to be able to fit in working on your comic project. I hope that when the time comes, you can be able to sit back and say, I'm glad I stopped saying one day and instead I said day one, and I started on my comic project. Whether you eventually dropped the project, or you're still working on it, or you have it completed, in my opinion, if you have a dream with this comic idea, it's better to say you tried and knowing it just didn't work out, instead of always wondering, what if you had just tried? And who knows, what if it all works out? Pick and choose what you will with my opinions here. I wish you the best of luck.